what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, May 1st, 2017. May Day, May Day, May Day, with all that entails. There's all kinds of marches and demonstrations and parades all around the world, not just in Russia. And a lot of them are really more protests than anything else, where people are getting very, very concerned about all that's going on in the world. All right, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I'm going to start off the program today with a little bit of a public apology, because recently I've been getting all kinds of email from readers of WhatReallyHappened.com saying that their antivirus was saying that there's malware and all the rest of it. And I wasn't seeing it here. Of course, I got good security here. And I'm paying to have a service actually scan my server several times a day to make sure that nobody's broken on in to plant malware. But as it turns out, it was in the ads. And I'd gone to my advertisers and I said, please make sure you're not serving up any adware. And it turns out this is one of the biggest malware hacks in history. And it does involve Google's DoubleClick and Zito, who is one of our advertisers, where somebody got in to DoubleClick and planted a lot of malware that has infected millions and millions of computers. And so I'm apologizing to all of my readers. I certainly didn't know it was happening. It wasn't coming technically from my server, but because I advertise with Zito, you have been exposed. So crank on out your security scanners and run a scan on all your machines right now. And we're looking at, websites like the Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post were among the websites serving up the malicious advertisements, according to Jerome Segura, who's a senior security researcher with Malwarebytes. And so, they got on through here. Now, the only good thing that is coming out of this is we're talking about a huge loss of revenue to Google, because they've had to shut down their DoubleClick. In fact, a lot of websites that are still trying to reference those ads are getting timeout errors, and that's slowing everything down as well. But it represents a major loss of revenue, and maybe finally the government will sit up and take notice that cybercrime is more than just a trivial concern for those of us who are home computer users, and maybe they'll finally agree to actually do something about it. But it was literally millions of users who were on this thing, and it apparently has been happening for a few days. And so to everybody who wrote me, and I wrote back saying, it's not my server, it wasn't my server, but it was Google. And so check all your systems there. All right, let's get on to the regular news, and what we're seeing here. North Korea continues to be a problem, and we are seeing all kinds of situations. There's an article that came out of, hang on just a second, Zero Hedge. The North Korean nightmare continues, and it is a nightmare, especially for us here in Hawaii. Now, I will grant you North Korea's recent missile tests make it look like they don't work. But over the weekend, I actually found a database of all North Korea's missile tests. And these are brand new missiles, so of course they're going to test them. They actually have a very high success rate, certainly higher than that cruise missile attack by Donald Trump into Syria. So they do have some working rockets, and some of them can reach here. And Claire and I were noticing as we're going around talking to our friends here, everybody is very, very concerned about this. And they're all very angry that the U.S. government is continuing to provoke North Korea with all these flotillas or armadas off their coast and rattling of sabers, because they all understand North Korea has no reason to attack the United States other than the continual threats coming from the United States. Now, Tillerson is out there threatening North Korea, and basically was addressing the Security Council last Friday, and said that all of the well-intentioned diplomatic efforts to halt North Korea's nuclear program have failed. It is only by first dismantling them that there can be peace, stability, economic prosperity for all of Northeast Asia. Now, I have two concerns with that. Look at all these other nations the United States government has stuck their nose into over the last 2 decades. Do you see peace? Do you see stability? Do you see prosperity? No. Me neither. It's been an absolute disaster. And if they go in with a military strike to get North Korea's nuclear weapons, it is guaranteed they're not going to get them all. Because I'm sure by now Kim Jong-un is dispersing his working nuclear weapons to other locations in order to prevent them from being attacked. Speaking of attack, my server is under attack again by the children. Now, McMaster is out there saying the U.S. must be prepared for military operations in North Korea. So they're out there. The war is on. The war is definitely on. And it could easily spiral out of control. McMaster's is out there saying North Korea is openly in defiance of the international community. They've used that argument before in a lot of other countries that were just minding their own business. They said that about Saddam Hussein. They keep saying it now about Syria. They're saying it about... It's one of the stock excuses for this country to go to war against countries that have not, in fact, attacked us. We're going to do a quick shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And so McMaster's is out there rattling the sabers, making stink face at the North Koreans. And it's making the rest of the world very, very nervous. They're trying to sort of get us used to the idea war is coming. You might as well get used to it and stop, stop opposing it. Get on board the war agenda. The war is great. And we're certainly seeing it all over the corporate media. They're out there just pounding war on North Korea, war on North Korea. They're bad, we're good. And by the way, I noticed over the weekend looking at a lot of TV channels and shows, there's a lot of Russia bashing that's going on. That's ramping up. It is just absolutely insane out there. Now, Japan has deployed one of their warships to support the U.S. Armada and has authorized necessary use of weapons for the first time since World War II. Following World War II, Japan basically said, we don't want nuclear weapons, we don't want weapons at all other than defensive. But now they're starting to project power again. Now, John McCain came out with a very interesting observation. He's saying that the nuclear standoff with North Korea is very much like the Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion. And it is rather interesting that McCain would make that linkage because the Cuban Missile Crisis was triggered by the U.S. government's placing of nuclear missiles in Turkey to threaten the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union responded by putting nuclear missiles in Cuba. So we have here the U.S. government threatening not just North Korea, but every other country on Earth. And that's what's causing these countries to try and build or buy or somehow acquire nuclear weapons to deter an invasion. And that's what North Korea wants. North Korea has a very strong memory of what it's like to have the U.S. come on in and blow things up from the Korean War. And they've been hearing nothing but belligerent talk from the United States for the last several years. They have a justifiable expectation that the U.S. is coming to invade them. And the only thing that will stop the United States from doing that is a nuclear deterrent. And that's why the rush is on. So, apparently our chief of the Central Intelligence Agency, Mike Pompeo, is now in South Korea meeting with his South Korean counterpart. It's an internal meeting to discuss North Korea. And they probably are discussing North Korea, but they may also be discussing interfering with South Korea's election. Because on May 9th, South Koreans go to the poll. And the candidate who is leading in the polls right now does not want the United States in South Korea. He's a supporter of the Sunshine Policy. He has already openly said if he wins the presidency of South Korea, he's going to extend the hand of friendship across that DMZ to North Korea and say, let's reconcile, let's tone it down. Nobody wants another Korean War. Let's talk reunification, which is what they were talking about about 5 years ago before the U.S. got in and meddled with that one. So the CIA may be going over there to try and mess with their elections to make sure their war hawk candidate gets elected. Catherine Austin Fitts, in a recent interview, is saying North Korea is on the same list as Wesley Clark's 7 countries in 5 years, and the reason is bringing about the one world currency. See, that's the payoff for a one world government. A one world currency loaned into circulation at interest by a single global private central bank. That's what they're aiming for. Turn the entire human race into permanent debt slaves. Another article, this is from Information Clearinghouse, what the corporate media never tells you about North Korea. And it goes on back saying, walk a mile in their moccasins, or whatever it is they wear over there. How many times has the U.S. threatened to use nuclear weapons against North Korea? They actually considered doing it during the height of the Korean War. North Korea has repeatedly asked the United States to engage in bilateral talks to cool off the escalation. The offer was flatly rejected by both Obama and Donald Trump. How do you resolve differences if nobody's willing to talk, if one side is not willing to talk? No dialogue, no peace. Now, the corporate media is out there saying Kim Jong-un is the one who's being unreasonable. You can't negotiate with him. And they're aiming toward a war. Now, according to the Straits Times, they are reporting that North Korea is saying that they could go ahead with their 6th nuclear test at any time. And maybe this came from North Korea. If so, it was a very reckless and provocative thing to do. Or they may set off some conventional explosions underground that create a little tiny shock wave and then say, oh, gee, our test failed. Just like that last missile test failed. To sort of underscore the fact that the U.S. is going completely hysterical over what is not really all that big a deal. They can't get their rockets up into the air. They can't get the bombs to explode. I would not be concerned if Kim Jong-un is looking for a way to defuse the situation without his personally having to back down and lose face. And having a bunch of test failures gives him that safety hatch. So, another article. This is from AntoniusAquinas.com. Why is North Korea being so unreasonable? Why hasn't Kim Jong-un responded with open arms and shouts of joy for what Uncle Sam wants? And maybe it's because North Korea not only has first-hand knowledge of U.S. diplomacy, but it can point to the grisly consequences that happen to regimes that do not have nuclear capabilities when they fall out of favor with Washington warmongers, such as Serbia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Syria, as some recent examples. And North Korea does not have to look around the globe for what the United States does to nations who do not have nuclear deterrence. And they can recall events which took place not so far away. For more than a decade, the United States government pulverized Vietnam. And despite all the destruction and the mass murder, it was to no avail, except, of course, to make the arms manufacturers rich and the American citizens poor, as well as 60,000 of them dead. Now, over in Syria, government troops have launched a new offensive in eastern Homs. The 5th Assault Corps and the National Defense Forces, supported by Russian air power, began an operation against ISIS in the eastern Homs countryside. By Monday, earlier today, government forces retook the villages of Jabab Hamad, Tadmuria, Jabad Hamad, Rajim al-Qasir, Rajim Durgam, al-Rajim al-Ali, Al-Rijim al-Madraji, the Al-Ilam Hill, and the Turks Hill. They're making huge, huge progress along that. The Syrian army is on the verge of capturing al-Nusra's key bastion in eastern Damascus. So that is not going well at all. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'm just curious, do you think there's any validity to this starving of the North Koreans? I mean, we've been propagandized in the past from mainstream media. I'm just wondering, I mean, I'm hearing they're eating grass and bark. Have you looked into any of this?
Well, as a matter of fact, I don't have any actual ground truth on that. But over the weekend, I was using Google Earth to look at North Korea, in particular the naval base where the Gore submarine is deployed, some of their missile launch facilities, and I couldn't help but noticing North Korea seems to have a very strong middle class. There were a lot of very nice homes I could see on those satellite images. So,
right.
You know, and again, we've been lied to about every single country the U.S. government wants to invade. Oh, they're suffering under cruel dictatorship. They're this, they're that, so forth and so on. So I would not at all be surprised if we're being lied to about what's going on in North Korea. When I was talking to some people over the weekend, they talk about, oh, that Kim Jong-un, you know, what's he thinking? And I just keep saying one thing. Everything you think you know about North Korea and Kim Jong-un is being told to you by the same people who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons.
Yeah. I tell you, man, if we could just get the general public to understand that every country we've invaded and overthrown was off the teat of the central bank. I mean, this is such part and parcel to the whole matter. And I'm kind of just at the point where I believe we are going to war with them. It's a foregone conclusion. It's time to stock up on essentials and just hunker down. I mean, I think now we're in the phase where we need to start planning ahead for the worst case scenario instead of just sitting back and watching it happen.
Even NBC News is out there now, but now they're saying it's a good thing to be a prepper, and you got to start thinking about how you're going to survive a nuclear attack. And it's insane out there. They're really moving forward on all of this stuff. And Paul Craig Roberts is out there with these very alarming bits of information he's getting from the contacts he still has within the U.S. government. Talking about that in a little bit.
Yeah, hey, real quick. There's a really good documentary on Netflix about North Korea, and there's a dissident from Spain, and he became a citizen, and it was, you know, maybe somewhat of a puff piece, but man, things look really good there. And I think North Korea really does have a legitimate fear of the United States. I mean, based on our history and all the horrific things we've done to other countries, you know, don't give up your nukes. I mean, that's really the message. Don't give up your defensive weapons and just, you know, U.S. seems to be cowardice in that regard. Only after we disarm a country do we have the cojones to go in there and destroy them, you know.
Yeah, that was Saddam's big mistake. He surrendered all of his weapons of mass destruction to the United Nations, and then he got invaded anyway.
Yep. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. All righty, story coming out of Global Research. They are supporting this with video. U.S. armored vehicles arrive in northern Syria. Is it an invasion? Now, as I reported earlier, the Syrian forces have regained the initiative against the U.S.-backed terrorists, and they're taking away territory. And so the U.S. government isn't ready to give up in Syria. They see it as a necessary stepping stone to the much longed-for war in Iran. And as a matter of fact, we have a very alarming story coming out of Fars News that the White Helmets may be preparing another false flag operation similar to Idlib. And this is coming out of people who live in that area, and they're watching the White Helmets, and there are certain things that they do ahead of one of these false flags, and they're going through those same motions again. These are people who've seen it happen before, and they're saying they're getting ready to do it again. So it's tragic for all those people, and for the American people as well. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, we're talking about the White Helmets, who have been lauded as these humanitarians, and they had a movie which won an Academy Award, and these are supposed to be the good guys. But we are getting this report from people at the scene that the white helmets have been spotted before setting up these false flags, and they're going through those same actions again. Now, an article from Activist Post is reporting that photos from Syria are showing that the white helmets are actually al-Nusra and al-Qaeda. It's all the same group of people. They just put on the helmet and the glove, and they go out and they pose for the cameras. And I understand they get about $2,000 each for every one of these videos that they make. It's all deception. The first casualty in war is the truth. Now, story coming out of the Free Thought Project. The U.S. is repeating the same war crime in Syria that starved 500,000 children to death in Iraq. They're imposing sanctions and a blockade to starve the people into surrendering. That is a war crime, by the way. Story coming out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. U.S.-led airstrikes on ISIS have killed 352 civilians, says the Pentagon, and they regret it. They feel really bad. Please look at our frowny face. But monitoring group Air Wars is saying that the number is at least 3,000 civilians killed by these U.S.-led airstrikes in Syria and Iraq. They're bombing so many people. Trump is actually running out of bombs. This is coming out of Patriot Rising. They've used up the stockpiles. They're running out of bombs, which is good news for all the bomb makers like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and Boeing. Not so good for the civilians. Those bombs keep hitting. Not so good for the American taxpayers who are being forced to pay for all this mass murder. Now, the other day I was talking about the difficulties of having 3 players in a war, as opposed to 2 sides, good guys and the bad guys, and how the Kurds were supposed to be our allies, and Turkey is supposed to be our ally, and yet Turkey and the Kurds are at each other's throat. And so we're looking at this article out of the news, antiwar.com, where tensions are starting to grow between the U.S. and Turkey along that Syrian border. And remember, last week they'd sent in a bunch of troops there at a jump-off point to look like they were going to carve off a little buffer zone, a safe zone, to begin the balkanization of Syria. Turkish President Erdogan says he's deeply saddened to see the U.S. flag flying alongside terrorists from the Kurdish YPG. Says he intends to demand President Trump stop supporting the Kurds in an upcoming White House visit. Says this needs to be stopped right now. Well, that is going to be very, very difficult to do, because part of the long-term plan for that part of the world is the creation of a Kurdistan by carving chunks out of Syria, Turkey, and Iraq. See, the plan is to take the big Middle Eastern countries and turn them into little Middle Eastern countries that are easier to bully and push around. Now, interestingly enough, down in Yemen, Al-Qaeda is actually fighting right alongside the U.S. forces and the Saudi-backed militia. So, in one country, they're our enemy, we think, we've been told. In the other country, they're working on our side. Now, there's an interesting story out of Global Research. They're declaring Yemen is now the graveyard where empires come to die, and they're reporting that sources inside Riyadh are saying the Saudi government has already admitted defeat. They cannot take control of Yemen. They can't slap those Yemeni people back into accepting a foreign puppet ruler. So we're probably going to see a direct military intervention by the United States, your kids, your money, of course. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and then we're going to be talking about Russia when we get on back. So back after these few words. And aloha, America. We're going to start with a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'm wondering with Donald Trump, with all his flip-flops, since he's become president. I wonder what his campaign in 2020 is going to look like. What's his message going to be? I do know this. He's going to wear a hat. His new hat is going to say, "Make America and the world great again."
Yeah, could very well be.
Because he's a nationalist and a globalist.
Well, at this point, I don't see how Trump could even consider winning a second term in the White House without massive election fraud to keep him in there. He sort of, as far as I'm concerned, he shot his own second term in office down with that cruise missile attack on Syria.
Absolutely. And, Mike, I wanted to get to Syria, but first, some of your callers, they've said in recent days or last week how they were Bernie Sanders supporters, and, you know, if they had the chance to vote for him, they would have voted for him. Would it have been any different if Bernie Sanders was in the White House? There's a deep state, people. They would have been controlling him as well.
You're absolutely right. At this point, I think the lesson we're taking away from the 2016 election is it doesn't matter who we vote into the White House. The control of the nation is in private hands, unaccountable hands, unelected hands, and they see their best fortunes as a new global war is where they're taking us.
And, Mike, on Syria, these people are insane. They've been after Syria since the 1950s. There's an excellent video on the Vineyard of the Sakers website, and it's about a half-hour video, talks about how the U.S. and the Europeans have been after Syria since the 1950s. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Eisenhower, I mean, everyone points to his speech, the military-industrial complex speech, but he was no angel either. I mean, look at the coups against Guatemala, Iran, and this activity in Syria happened under Eisenhower, under Ike.
Yes.
So he was no angel as well.
Or maybe he was controlled by outside forces even all the way back. We don't know when this began, where our presidents were being controlled. We do know that Kennedy strained at the leash and he was killed for it.
Right. I mean, Eisenhower did have the Dulles brothers to deal with, so perhaps they were controlling him. They and their Wall Street clients. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We know that this kind of back-channel control over the presidency goes back at least to Roosevelt, because when Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler blew the whistle on the planned coup by the Wall Street bankers against Roosevelt, Roosevelt couldn't do anything about it. The bankers simply said, "You arrest any one of us, we will crash your economy and we'll blame it on your New Deal." And Roosevelt was not able to do anything about the coup d'etat attempt until World War II officially broke out, at which point he nailed quite a few of these people under the Trading with the Enemies Act. So, yeah, our elections may have been an illusion going all the way back, not just to World War II, but World War I. We don't really know. In fact, it may go all the way back to the founding of that Federal Reserve, because certainly they were able to constrain Woodrow Wilson into signing the bill, and in his own writings years later, he said how much he regretted it, that he had, in effect, destroyed his own country and all that it stood for. All right, getting back to the present day here, story coming out of Global Research, Cold War 2.0, the Golden Cut. There will be no Russophobia reset. And basically, at the very least, they're playing the same scam on the American people they did back in the 1950s and the 1960s. The Soviet Union is the evil empire. We have to just take all your money and build weapons to hold away a Russian invasion or a Soviet invasion. By the way, the Soviets never actually tried to invade. It was, again, back then, the U.S. that was encroaching on territory all over. Now, earlier I mentioned Paul Craig Roberts. Last week, he came out with an article saying that his sources still within the U.S. government are saying there is a serious plan underway to launch a first-strike nuclear attack on Russia. And the theory is that the Russians will be so afraid of a second strike, they will not dare retaliate. Whoever came up with that little gem does not know the Russian mindset, personality. And Lavrov's already come on back and said, yeah, if we're attacked, we will attack back. Well, according to the latest article, apparently this plan also expands to China. And it's insane, it's reckless, it's irresponsible, and this is what Washington, D.C. is doing. Now, all these people who think nuclear war is winnable, from their point of view, it's at least survivable. They have all their taxpayer-funded bunkers. There's Mount Weather, there's the Greenbrier, there's a whole bunch of them all over the place. They've been building new underground bunkers all over the country going back to the 1990s. Heavy construction. And that's where they'll ride it out. Now, you who paid for it all, don't bother going up and knocking on the door. You will not be allowed in. It will be a drastic depopulation of the Earth. And they may decide in the nuclear war to use neutron bombs, which are specifically designed to kill people but not cause much damage to the real estate, that being the item of value that they're after. There is only one problem with a neutron bomb. Neutrons are the one atomic particle that can turn other materials into being radioactive isotopes. And so there's still going to be a horrendous cleanup problem for somebody to deal with. Article coming out of shtfplan.com, The Relentless Push Towards War. What could possibly go wrong? How about everything? And that is the real concern. Once this thing gets going, nobody is really in control. The lives of every human being on Earth are in the hands of whichever world leader is the least mentally stable. And right now, with the exception of Vladimir Putin, they'd all look pretty good in a straitjacket at this point. I mean, I can't imagine that they really want a nuclear war, but maybe that's their answer to overpopulation and bad infrastructure and everybody wanting stuff. We'll just kill them all off and start it all over again. Remember those Georgia Guidestones? Say the Earth's population should be no more than 500 million globally. Now here's another article. This is from Information Clearinghouse, and it has a very telling headline. Do Americans have no shame? And it says, Americans have a lot of nerve complaining about outside meddling in our politics from Russia. At the same time, they're okay with Israel doing it. And the U.S. government has violated the sovereign rights of much of the planet. Americans owe the world heartfelt acts of contrition. Actually, it's the U.S. government that owes the world acts of contrition. There ought to be a march of apology of everybody in the U.S. government and the war machine to people in Grenada, Haiti, Honduras, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Libya, everywhere. The U.S. government is the aggressor in this new rush to a world war. We're the bad guys. I know you don't want to hear it. We're the bad guys here. NATO has just announced that they're going to boost their presence and prolong the training mission in Afghanistan. They don't want to admit they're having to arm up the place because they can't get it under control. No, it's just a training mission. We're sending those soldiers up there to train on how to guard and protect the poppy fields and train them on how to handle large sacks of raw opium, and when necessary, we're going to train them to shoot the Taliban. It's all just training, really. Apparently, Macedonian nationalists have stormed the parliament to hold on to power. We're seeing that country go through what appears to be another Soros-sponsored color revolution. And it's getting very, very violent over there as well. And it's rather interesting because it was only a month ago that Macedonia started to outlaw all of Soros' non-governmental organizations in that country. A lot of countries are starting to do that. Russia's banned them. I think Belgium and Hungary have banned it. They don't want any part of this stuff anymore. Now then, a little bit of news. Apparently, President Trump has been told that Justice Anthony Kennedy is going to resign or retire from the Supreme Court, meaning Trump will have an opportunity to pick a second judge for the Supreme Court. And Kennedy was appointed by Ronald Reagan. He's a conservative centrist, And very often he has been the deciding vote in many of the cases. So we'll see where that's going to go and what kind of a fight we'll have in Congress over the confirmation. Now then, Donald Trump has declared today, May 1st, to be Loyalty Day, to remind Americans to never question the government, to just hug your government officials and do as you're told here. Now, for anybody from the Trump White House who's listening to this show, loyalty cannot be demanded. It has to be earned. And loyalty is a two-way street. Donald Trump has a lot of nerve asking for loyalty from we, the American people, when he has already proven himself very disloyal to every voter who supported him. Now then, this is very alarming. This is being reported in The Independent over in Great Britain. Donald Trump is now blaming the U.S. Constitution for all the problems he's encountered during his first 100 days in office. In an interview with Fox News to mark the milestone, Donald Trump called the system of checks and balances on power archaic. This is right back when George Bush was saying the Constitution's just a blankety-blank piece of paper. Trump went on to say it's a very rough system, it's an archaic system, and it's really a bad thing for the country. We have a president who's already talking, despite his oath of office. He wants to get rid of the Constitution now. Now, another report says the president is eyeing changes to the press laws, and this is in response to some of the outright falsehoods that have appeared in the corporate media. And basically, the president wants to make changes to the libel laws, which would then allow lawsuits to be filed against the corporate media for publishing fake news about people. And some people may say this sounds like a really good thing. Certainly the corporate media is saying it's restricting freedom of the press. Well, something you need to remember about that First Amendment. The First Amendment does not exist to protect lies and liars. It exists to protect the truth from the retaliation of the liars. And I think back to that Fox synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit, where these two reporters lost the case on appeal when the judge said there is no law that requires the corporate media to tell the truth to anybody, and that any employee who refuses to lie when told to do so can legally be fired for cause. I think we need a law like that. Everyone's screaming about fake news this, fake news that. I would think that, yeah, having some laws that constrain the corporate media to report the truth might not be a tremendously bad idea at this point. Apparently at one of the May Day rallies, there was a liberal had a T-shirt showing ISIS beheading Donald Trump, reminding us all how the liberals are so peaceful and progressive and love Trump's hate. It was not well received. Now, here is a very telling story. The Antifa thugs have put out a video on Twitter demanding that George Soros pay them for their services. They're saying the payment is overdue. It's further confirmation. This Democrat terror group is funded by George Soros. He's trying to kick up chaos, a color revolution in this country. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. John in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, just a minor objection to start when you say U.S. is the bad guy and U.S. should pay reparations to the rest of the world. I'm not up for being under the yoke that Germany's been under because the Holocaust was a hoax. You know, I think this country has been wound up by Israel, controlled by the AIPAC groups or whatever. So I'm not going to sign up for that program.
Well, you caught me. No, before you go forward, you've caught me on something, and I've been chastised by this a lot in the email. I'm trying to make a point of always saying the U.S. government, as opposed to the U.S. and the American people. Because it really is
right.
the U.S. government that is causing this, and the U.S. government should pay for it.
Well, and that's why I want to keep analyzing this whole thing, like you mentioned, the Antifa and the alt-right and all these people having these groups. That Lauren Southern person, she has gone from Berkeley from Tuesday. She's in Paris, France now. They're trying to have this whole white uprising crap. It would seem to me that they don't care about what's happening in Syria and all these other things. I'm not getting anything out of the alt-right that they want to get rid of the U.S. government for being this immoral, used military of Israel to achieve Israel's world dominance goals or whatever it is. These people have to be contained. Everybody wants to trash on Antifa, but it's kind of like, what is the alt-right doing? Who is this Lauren Southern person? She's been on Fox News already? She was on Gutfeld's show? This woman's a rising star, and she goes out and gives a 90-second speech in Berkeley, and she's this big hero of the alt-right, and they're promoting Trump. Most of those people are promoting Trump, and you've realized that Trump is just another figurehead under the deep state.
Yeah, and I would be willing to wager that his talk about getting rid of the Constitution did not actually occur to him. I think somebody fed him that, the same people who fed that idea to George Bush. But as far as I'm concerned, any government that is not perfectly in compliance with that Constitution is neither legal nor legitimate, and we do not owe them our loyalty or our obedience, and certainly not the lives of our children. Okay?
Yeah, if the alt-right movement is not an anti-war movement, it's suspect to me. That's my point.
I agree with you on that one. John, we're going to have to let you go, take a break for commercials, back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to the phones. We're going to take a few more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, I emailed you this morning, and I just wanted to touch bases with it. There's a movie tonight from Independent Lens called National Bird. It's on PBS, and evidently 3 whistleblowers have come forward to break their silence around one of the most controversial issues of our time, the secret U.S. drone war. So I just wanted to throw that out to you and remind your listeners on PBS tonight. Set your recorders if you can't watch it live, but it's called National Bird on PBS.
All right, excellent. Well, National Bird, PBS, yeah, we'll take a look at that.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. And let's see, we're going to go to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I have a philosophical question to ask everybody in the audience, but you obviously as well. And that is, what we have obviously is a government that openly proclaims the right to kill its own citizens, that openly proclaims the right to imprison us without a trial, to torture us, that has slipped all bonds with the Constitution, publicly proclaims the Constitution as meaning nothing, is not constrained even by budgets or anything else, and is threatening nuclear war and bombing how many countries all over the world that we're not legally at war with. The philosophical question is, at what point do we take matters into our own hands and take them before they take us?
I'm hearing that from so many people right now, and it is a situation I had hoped to avoid. I still don't like the idea of a violent uprising, but it does feel like one could easily come because everybody I'm talking to, they're just angry over what's going on, where the government is just out there acting like an imperial power. They're treating the American people with the same disdain that they treat the people in the countries being invaded. If you look around at our rapidly deteriorating society, the infrastructure, the standard of living is almost in free fall at this point. And a lot of people are really reaching the breaking point. There's a lot of anger out there. We're seeing a lot of symptoms of a general depression, and all the depression is repressed anger. And when it breaks free, there's going to be a lot of unhappiness. And I can't think of a way to prevent it. I can't think of a way to stop it. I'm out of ideas.
Mike, it to me, it really at this point, it's a matter of self-defense. It's like, do we put this rabid dog asleep, or do we let it kill us and our kids?
I see your argument. I see your argument.
Well, that's it for me. I want everybody out there to think about that, and that's it for me. Thanks, Mike.
All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. Back with 2 more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a call from Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha, youngin.
Aloha.
I heard about the commentary with Trump and the Constitution and so forth ad nauseum, and I was I have to admit, I was in a bit of disbelief.
Yes.
Remembering back about what the Trump Jr. had said at one point. However, it has confirmed one thing in my mind, that Trump is essentially purposefully swimming in the proverbial swamp that he has claimed that he was going to drain. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made that comment about the Constitution. So, anyway, that's just a thought I'd share with you. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks an awful lot. And yeah, I got a lot of emails from people who were responding to that, and they're just in shock. I mean, it was only January that he took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend that Constitution, and now he's out there saying, oh, it's archaic, it's bad for the country. No, it's the only thing preventing this country from becoming an absolute dictatorship. And I'm alarmed at how we keep getting these people in the Oval Office who are trying to find some way to get rid of it. Remember when George Bush would joke about how much easier it would be if it was a dictatorship so long as he was the dictator? All right, we're going to take another phone call, then we're going to get back to the news. James in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I wanted to say, I had a little saying, the world, we all know that every German wasn't a Nazi, right?
True.
But the whole world thought every Nazi was a German.
Well, that's not entirely true. I mean,
have you seen the propaganda?
Hang on a minute. There were some Jewish officers in Hitler's high command who were Nazis.
Yeah, but did you see what happened to Germany at the end of the war? Did you see the propaganda that was portrayed from Disney?
Oh yeah,
all that propaganda. Yeah, everybody thought every German was a Nazi. That's why when they tried to surrender, they were just shot on sight. But other than that, the reason why Trump is acting this way is because, I mean, how can you not see it? I mean, look at how he made his money from his gambling casinos to him being draft dodging the Vietnam War. He doesn't look at, there is no loyalty. The only loyalty is to himself. And like the last caller said, you see the divide and conquer with the Antifa, and they're trying to make Americans just kill each other. It looks like that's what they want. It's like they want Americans, the right especially, not the right, but the alt-right, trying to tell the right, you need to kill these leftist people because they're trying to take your culture or something like that.
Well, you're overanalyzing it. It's much simpler than that. They're trying to stir up discord within the population, so we're fighting against each other, so we cannot unite together and march on Washington, D.C. and say, no more of these wars. We have had it. We are fed up. And the FBI did exactly the same thing back in the 1960s as part of COINTELPRO. They were deliberately fanning up racism. There was that Black Panther coloring book. There was all this nonsense going on because if the population is fighting amongst themselves, then they are unable to unite against a government that is taking them into more and more war. And they're replaying that part of the COINTELPRO fireside cookbook, as it were. And that's really all there is to it. All the other labels are irrelevant to the agenda, which is to get us to fight with each other instead of against an oppressive government.
But they would love for us to kill. They would love for us to kill each other, right, Michael? But besides fighting to cause each other harm,
Well, I don't know how much they want us to kill each other off, but I think they just, the violence serves their purpose. It's distracting us from focusing on what the government is doing. It's distracting people from thinking very carefully and clearly about the propaganda we are being fed to lead on to more of these wars.
All we got to do is not, even if we're in the Army, you don't got to fight them, because when I was in the Army, there was this poster, and it said, the greatest weapon in the world is the U.S. soldier, and everything, it runs on water, and everything else runs on fuel. And it's basically, you know, if there was nobody to show up for the war, then there wouldn't be no war.
Well, yeah, the issue there is we have paid provocateurs in the streets of America. I mean, like I said, Soros is supporting Antifa. He's paying these people to go on out and cause trouble. And a lot of people join the military not expecting to get into a war. Many of them join the military because of the economic conditions in their communities where there weren't any other options. And I've talked about how Claire and I talked to these kids who were outside the recruiting center at the bottom of the hill, and they said, we had to enlist. It was either that or be homeless. And it's kind of an economic draft, which is an artifact of a wartime economy. But even if you don't have people who are willing to go on out and fight, there's always mercenaries in the world that are going to go on out, and for a very healthy paycheck, they will go on out and do what you want them to do. It is unfortunately, tragically easy to get a war going. It's very difficult to stop it. But what we have right now is a government that is absolutely convinced that without a new major global war, when the economy implodes, we the people are going to turn on the bankers and the government that allowed it to happen. And they're absolutely right. We would. And so what they need is an enemy in a war that they can point the finger of blame at. Yes, we're all going hungry, we're all suffering, but it's because of that gosh darn war with Russia and China and North Korea and Iraq and Iran and all these other nations in cahoots against us.
But you really don't think the American people are smart enough to think that, just like in the Ukraine when the drafting officers were coming to try to take their kids, the towns, they're just kicking them out, saying, get out of here, leave. And even the officers, the drafting officers, didn't even really feel like they wanted to be there either. They didn't want to be there. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
we could create a hope
we could see that in
a prolonged war. You need bodies.
We could see that here because, again, in all past wars, the propaganda machine succeeded in convincing the American people the war was just, it was necessary, it was important, to world peace. But again, our current government does not have the trust and confidence of the military, rank and file. It doesn't have the trust and confidence of the American people. We're a war-weary people. We've been at war, for a long time, almost continuously, multiple countries since 2003, and the American people are just fed up with it. So you're absolutely right. You might actually see some violence directed against the recruiting centers and if they start the draft, that might actually be a good thing. That would galvanize the American people to unite against the war, because that's what triggered a huge surge in opposition to Vietnam, because the American people really didn't see a reason to risk their children's lives and bodily parts in the jungles on the other side of the world. It just didn't make sense to them.
Exactly, and that's what you saw all the hemp and marijuana movement. That's what everybody's going to do. That's how we're going to fight back. Everybody's going to finally get high and realize, hey, let's go out to eat. We don't need to fight. Right, Mike?
Yeah.
That would be something, right? You have a good one, okay?
All right,
nice talking to you.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. We're going to close the phone lines for a little while. We'll reopen them later. But I do want to get some news going here. Congress did reach a deal to keep the U.S. government going through up until October 1st. And basically, they funded the war, they funded Planned Parenthood, they would not fund the wall. And this has a lot of people very, very angry, because regardless of your feelings about abortion, Planned Parenthood shouldn't be receiving a penny of taxpayer money. For one thing, they are making a huge amount of money selling those body parts. I think the top honcho at Planned Parenthood drives a very expensive sports car, supercar. And apparently he's been caught on tape, again, still out there peddling baby parts for money. So let's talk about Donald Trump's tax plan. Article over in Global Research says more money for the oligarchs. And basically they're cutting taxes on business, and it's going to accelerate the shift of money up that pyramid to the top. And to be very honest, Trump's tax plan is merely rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Because unless and until the wealth is being recycled from the top back down to the working and middle class as decent wages and salaries so that they can pay their bills and pay their taxes and pump money back into the economy at those shopping malls and car lots, this economy, already down by the bow and taking water, is in fact doomed. We're seeing this nation destroyed by the money junkies. They can't get a handle on their addiction. They don't feel they should have to. And like any other addict, they're destroying everything around them in that quest to keep feeding that addiction. Now, Stockman is out there saying that the tax plan, as it is dead on arrival, and Wall Street is delusional for believing it. It is a corporate giveaway, and it doesn't address the main problem we have with this economy, which is its inequality. Now, Trump has come on out and said earlier today that he's thinking about raising the gas tax for the infrastructure plan. Can't get Congress to approve it out of the already paid-in tax revenues because they're being spent on war and on Israel and on Planned Parenthood. So he's just going to come up with a new tax. Mr. Trump, there is nothing left out here for you to tax. You guys got it all. Article out of Zero Hedge. The economic reality is the bottom 50% of Americans no longer matter. And it's talking about the huge numbers of people who've been put onto food stamps by the loss of employment. And it's just huge economic cost. And they're certainly not being consumers. Very alarming article out of Global Research. Right now, the United States is the world leader in child poverty. Now, financier and CEO Peter Schiff once said, people don't go hungry in a capitalist economy, but people are growing hungry here, especially children. And that alone tells us we've lost our capitalist economy and we've descended into fascism. We have these people in Congress out there saying, well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Well, I don't think the vast majority of these people want a free lunch. What they want are jobs, but the jobs are gone. They've been offshored. They're being replaced by automation. Nobody is willing to hire people to do jobs. And there are jobs that do need to be done, like repairing our infrastructure. We are seeing the effects of a wartime economy. Every penny that is sucked out of the pockets of the American people goes into that war machine. Now, a lot of people are wondering how much of our tax money does go into war. We're not really sure. There's the official Pentagon budget, but that's held as a separate line item from where we're still paying the costs on previous wars, which includes Veterans Affairs. And then there's all the Black Project money, which is hidden over somewhere in the Department of Agriculture's budget. But it looks like more than half of every single tax dollar is being spent on war. Can you imagine what this country would be like if 100% of every tax dollar was being spent on this nation? It would be a very, very different, much better country. Now, down in Brazil, they've called a general strike, their first general strike in 21 years. It's paralyzed Britain. And the issue for the strikers is the declining economy. All the wealth has been sucked up by their private central bank. And they're protesting against all these austerity reforms, which always come back to the same thing. You must make do with less so the bankers can have more. That is the perpetual message coming out of these banking houses. Article out of Blacklisted News. Apparently, Home Capital had a partial run on the bank. They lost 70% of their deposits in 1 week. And in the last 3 days, the withdrawal of deposits at Home Capital Group's high-interest savings accounts has gone into a full-blown mad rush, not to be the last person to have their money at what is effectively now an insolvent alternative lender. It's starting to come apart over there. And this is why they want the cashless society, so that you can't go to a financial institution and say, give me my money. They want to take away that freedom to have your own money under your own control. They'll manage your money for you. They'll make sure that you have enough to eat and you just work and do as you're told, and we'll take care of all the money. Remember the last institution that ran that way? It was called the Antebellum Slave Plantation. Now, Donald Trump is saying, and I have to put it that way considering how many things he said that come to naught. Trump says he's actively considering breaking up the really big banks and reinstating Glass-Steagall. Wonderful if it's true. What would also be wonderful is actually seeing some of these crooked fraudsters prosecuted like they did over in Iceland. Actually throw them in jail. Or execute them like they do in some of the other countries when you defraud your customers. Now here's an article that came out of governmentslaves.info. The decline in consumption leads to the slowest U.S. economy growth in 3 years. So there, it's out there. The problems with the economy are that ordinary people don't have money to spend. They're not buying things. It's not the fault of online retailers. It's not the fault of whatever. The ordinary American is sucked dry. There's nothing left. And the money junkies refuse to accept that. They're still out there thinking, oh, there's vast amounts of untapped wealth out there. We just have to figure out a way to find it and tap into it. No, it's not there. It's not there. People are cutting their cable service. Dish TV lost 143,000 customers in the first quarter of this year. People can't afford those TV subscriptions anymore. Considering how much of what comes over those cable and satellite TV channels it lies anyway, it's probably actually a good thing. Now, there's another article. This one came out of shtfplan.com, and it basically is quoting a Chinese factory worker explaining why manufacturing jobs are not going to come back to America no matter what Donald Trump says or does, because the costs of labor in China are very, very low. The U.S. can't match it. Between the high cost of living and the high taxes and everything, you can't match it. Some jobs are coming back. Many will not come back. A lot will be replaced by robots. That's the new coming thing. Now, I'm going to deal with the issue of robots on some other day, but the way we bring manufacturing jobs back to this country is we invent new technologies that lead to new products that we manufacture here in the United States of America and do not allow to go to other countries, which was the big mistake that was made during the tech boom. When foreign countries came on in and said, well, we want to buy a license to manufacture your technology in our countries. And the people who had the rights to the technology said, sure, I'll get a big bunch of money now, buy myself a nice house, and I'll retire. And the technologies went to these other countries, along with the jobs to develop those products, because that's where the real payoff is from any new technology, the products that are manufactured and sold from it, and that was all being done in these other countries. This is why I do support Trump's policies with NASA, because it was NASA, during the race to the moon, that launched the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We need another one. It's the only way We're going to get our manufacturing base back. New technologies that are only here in the United States of America. Nobody else has them. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Let's talk about Obamacare, which is still out there. And they're trying to craft a new health care plan that will look like it's something incredibly different to the American people, but will go on basically giving our money to the health insurance industries. And it has never performed as well as they thought. And so basically, our U.S. healthcare sector, which ever since the Nixon administration has been more about money than health, may be building to a Lehman Brothers style disaster because they're not able to make it work. The health insurance companies who thought they were going to get insanely rich on it, it hasn't worked at all. People are just refusing to buy those policies, and they're accepting the IRS penalties. So that could, our economy, there are so many weak points. It's starting to look like a blimp with about 400 pieces of duct tape trying to cover the leaks. Now, little article out of Global Research. The petrodollar faces a growing threat from the East. More and more countries are paying for their oil in gold or gold-backed domestic currencies. Now remember, the petrodollar was brought into existence following Richard Nixon's ending of gold convertibility for the Federal Reserve note, because they were desperate to keep up foreign demand and use of U.S. dollars, loaned at interest, or to get other countries to send us manufactured goods and agricultural produce in exchange for stacks of ink and paper, or numbers in a computer. And that is starting to slow down. That is another major vulnerability of our current economic setup. And it's almost like those in charge of our economy. We know they're money junkies. All they think about is getting more for themselves. But they seem to have forgotten some of the basic tenets of what it takes to have a working national economy. They keep making more and more of these very short-term advantageous decisions that have devastating long-term consequences. And maybe they are expecting it all to fall apart. Maybe they're expecting that the U.S. government is going to lose this next World War. And they're just siphoning all the cash out of the society that they can before they head off to their bunkers or to the Cayman Islands or Jeff Epstein's little pleasure palace down in the Caribbean. Now, turning over to France, a little bit of good news there. Macron is plummeting in the polls. And apparently he has slipped a whole 6 points since last Sunday, meaning a week ago. And Marine Le Pen is getting a boost. Their runoff election is just a week away. And if Marine Le Pen wins, she's talking about ditching the euro, going back to the franc. And she says what she would like to see is a European Union that is an alliance of sovereign states without the central controlling authority in Brussels and without the need for a centralized European central bank. She's going to have a tough fight on her hands. If you've ever read All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, you understand that bankers will not hesitate to kill leaders of countries that refuse to go along with their scam. They tried to kill Andrew Jackson when he shut down the Second Bank of the United States. We know that when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, one of the members of the Warren Commission was John J. McCloy, president of the Chase Manhattan Bank, president of the World Bank. And I don't care how good a banker he is, he has no qualifications to be investigating the murder of John F. Kennedy. So we may safely presume that he was there to make sure that certain linkages between the assassination and Kennedy's Executive Order 11110 remained hidden. Oh, it's all a crazed lone nut assassin. It was Lee Harvey Oswald. By the way, one of the Russia bashing programs I saw being teased on TV is that we have proof the KGB killed John F. Kennedy. Ooh. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And turning to the immigration issue. Little article here. Basically, there's been an outbreak of measles in Minnesota's Somali community, and it is spreading outside that community to the rest of the states, state. And officials believe it was brought in by an immigrant because measles no longer occurs naturally in the United States unless you've been recently vaccinated, and then, of course, all bets are off. And I'm sure the vaccine makers are already trying to capitalize on this and say, oh, there's measles in Minnesota, we're going to sell more vaccines and so forth and so on, because that's the way that they really think. But we have, over the last several months, seen the introduction of previously eradicated diseases into not just the United States of America, but member states of the European Union. And it's almost like the people pushing for the globalism and blur us all together don't care if people get sick and die. Or maybe that's part of the depopulation agenda, to literally spark a pandemic by blurring the populations together. But it's a very reckless, dangerous policy, and I don't know if it's intentional or if it's just that these globalists are caught up in their fantasy about a wonderful one-world government, one-world private central bank, and they can't see the reality of the harm they're causing, or they simply don't care. They simply do not care. Now, apparently, the bloodletting over at Fox News is not stopping. Fox News co-president Bill Shine has tendered his resignation. Hannity is out there saying that if Shine is pushed out, it's basically the end of Fox News as we have known it, and it is being turned into another ultra-left propaganda portal. So there is no more balance on the corporate media. Now, last week, the National Security Agency came on out and made a grandiose statement saying that they had ended the spying on Americans' emails without a warrant. No need to worry. Just go on and type in your plans for a terror attack on the email. We're not going to see it. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. And William Binney, who was part of the NSA and actually helped build that system, is saying it is impossible for the NSA to stop. They have not stopped because the nature of the system itself, the bulk collection, means they're having to copy all the emails anyway before they can go down to a specific targeted, warranted individual. So it's basically, it's propaganda. We've stopped spying on you. You can stop worrying about your privacy. And we have every reason to worry about our privacy. And we're not going to feel we have our privacy back until all these instruments of state surveillance are torn down. Now, Julian Assange just put out a little video monologue. It's a YouTube video. We have it on whatreallyhappened.com. And he's saying it's completely out of control. Everything's backdoored, even the routers. And he says it is insanity at this point, because all of these backdoors are being found by the cyber criminals. Maybe that's how they got into Google and did their malware on the double-click system. And Assange has revealed that Apple hardware is completely compromised, and the malware is installed at the time of manufacture. And actually, many years ago, this was about the time when Windows was exposed as having an NSA key in their encryption system, is when Steve Jobs was driven out of Apple. And then he tried to start a new computer company called Next, which was actually a very good idea. He only had one flaw in the design. And there was a story floating around at the time that the government was trying to get Apple to put spyware into their products, and Steve Jobs was adamantly opposed. And that's why he was driven out of Apple. Of course, eventually he returned. Now, the computer that he wanted to put on out when he left Apple was called the Next, and it was a Linux box and quite high-powered for the day, and I actually wanted to get one and be a developer for it. But they made one critical decision on it. They made the main system drive a floptical, a writable optical disc. And the problem with any optical disc, rewritable optical disc, you have to erase the entire track, then burn the new data onto that track. You can't just go in and alter a single byte of storage. And as a result, it was hideously slow. They were originally meant for backup systems, not as a main system drive. And because Linux uses virtual memory and a paging file on the disk, it was just very, very slow. And it kind of ruined the machine's reputation. They did try and issue a second version that had a conventional hard drive, and the floptical was there for the backup, but by that time the public relations damage had been done, and Next did not survive, which is a shame. It did strike me as a cool machine. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Fred in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
This is kind of off topic, but I just wanted to let this be out there. The NRA's, wrapping down their convention in Atlanta. Last year they were in Louisville, and I went there. I've been a member for a long time, and my old lady's kind of a muckety-muck in Wisconsin NRA. But this is all about U.S. Concealed Carry Association being kicked out of the NRA booths. They weren't able to have a booth. A little bit about this. This is an organization out of West Bend, Wisconsin, started by an individual. He decided that with concealed carry that he could offer an insurance plan. West Bend, Wisconsin is the capital of a major insurance company, so he was able to work that up. But the bottom line is on this thing, he gets booted out of the NRA because the NRA decides they're going to come out with their own form of insurance. And that was spread all over the latest edition. I've been an NRA member for a long time, and this guy took the high ground. He sent everybody that's a member of USCCA emails telling him what happened, and he did actually show up there, and he was visiting another booth, so there were people that actually got to see the guy. But I just think it's underhanded. I mean, they're all working on the same side of this thing, and, NRA makes its money a lot of different ways. This guy is, small potatoes. He came up with the idea. He's made it grow. He's nationwide. Hannity talks about him, a lot of people. He's a good guy, and I just didn't like the way that the NRA handled it, and I know you got a lot of NRA members out there, and I think they should be aware of it.
Okay, well, I'm sure they're aware of it, and but again, NRA, once you get to a certain size, sooner or later you're infected by money junkies. And that may be what happened. Somebody inside NRA was saying, well, we're making good money from the memberships and the caps and everything we sell, but we could make more money if we do this. And just basically go on into it. I mean, you can't patent or trademark or copyright this idea of insurance for people who carry concealed, which, by the way, sounds like a really good idea to me.
It's great because it not only covers you that way, it covers you in your home. He's got it in 3 different levels. We pay $140 a year for the policy we have, and if something happens in the house, okay, and you're involved in a shooting there, it's covered. You got to get out of jail free. He gives you an 800 number for the attorney that will represent you, and he gives you everything up front. And it's just a wonderful idea the guy put together. And I don't think it would have flown without West Bend Insurance, being from that part of the world. But it's a great idea, and you're probably right. The NRA looked at this and said, but to push the guy out of the convention 24, 48 hours before it came off, if you've had some experience, when you go to conventions, you have booths, you build sets,
yes,
do stuff like that. And this guy, last year, he had a big set. He had more than one booth space. So I just want to put it out there. There's probably a lot of people listening to your show, and I thought I know you would be a good mouthpiece for this.
Well,
so thank you for your time.
You're welcome. I know from my experience back in my animator days when I would go to the SIGREP convention every year, and I was involved with the booth that Able Image Research, which was the software offshoot of Robert Able and Associates, the politics that they went through trying to get their booths, because there were other competing products, and those that had more money and more clout would very often try and prevent the small competitors from obtaining a booth, and sometimes they succeeded. It's a very, very ugly business behind the scenes, these conventions and trade shows. And a lot of dirty dealing. A lot of deals get signed with encouragements like booze, money, or girls, and it's just a reality of how these things get done. All right, we're going to move on here a little bit. Let's see. I need to do a relist. Oh, there we are. Before we take these phone calls, I want to mention something to you. I'm on Time Warner Cable out here in Hawaii, which is basically the monopoly. The attempt for DSL and other alternatives, they don't have the bandwidth. And we pay for the highest bandwidth you can get in your home here. And they were acquired by Spectrum. And especially today, the speed with which we can reach the mainland, or even other systems here in Hawaii, has just gone way downhill. A speed test is showing that I'm getting about 20 megabits per second into this house, which is like 10%, less than 10% of what we're supposed to be getting. And looking at down detector, apparently Spectrum has huge problems all over the country. There's a major issue with apparently trying to merge their internet with the one they just acquired and so forth. And it was rather interesting because over at CNET they had an article last February where Charter Spectrum was actually sued by the state of New York because of their slow internet speeds. And basically they were hit for what essentially amounted to false advertising. If you buy our cable system, you will get this speed into your home. And they're not actually getting it. We're certainly not getting it today, and I'm hoping they can make it go away because it is a big problem here. We'll go to something, and it's not the net neutrality taking effect because I'll go to like the New York Times or eBay, and it just takes forever for the data to get here. And I'm thinking that all of these monopolies and acquisitions aren't really what's best for the consumer. Because they've crafted a system that is so big they apparently cannot manage it and debug it. And if we had an alternative to Spectrum, I would certainly be moving over to it because this is absolutely unacceptable. All right. Now, that siren you're hearing in the back, that's a regular thing. The first of every month at 11:45, they test the emergency sirens in our area. So, no, we are not under attack. There is no tsunami coming in. There is no North Korean missile. All right, let's take some phone calls here. Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Michael, thank you so much for taking my call. I really appreciate it. You're one of the last bastions of truth and, honesty out there, and you're a true patriot. And I know you don't like accolades, but I'm just going to say a piece and then get your response. And you say all wars are bankers' wars. That's totally true. But, I'm thinking in 2008, when Bitcoin was started, I told a bunch of people, and I never bought any. I was, I just, figured if anything is, what a revolutionary transformation in currency. And my question to you is, and you're the perfect guy to ask this because you're, technological background. And that is that, if you look at the back in, Aaron Russo.
Yes.
When he talked about Rockefeller telling everybody's going to get chipped. Don't you think, it's not even, to me, I see it. It's the first stage. Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency, is the first stage before getting chipped. And it's you look at gold, you see, gold is, like you say, and, anybody that follows the gold market knows that gold has no, counterplay. If you own your physical gold, you have no counter, risk. And with Bitcoin, it's all on the internet. It's the first step to me towards getting how come they're not fighting it? You know, and you're the perfect guy to ask this question. I think Bitcoin is the precursor to being chipped. Aaron Russo, you know, it's so obvious to me. And I'll wait your response.
Okay, well, it's not obvious to me. We do know that there is a general attitude of wanting people to accept being chipped as a form of ID for all financial transactions, debit card transactions, credit card transactions, to basically get us away from the plastic which can be stolen from your pocket and used. Of course, the possibility of your hand being sliced off and used is certainly a real probability out there. I don't think that Bitcoin in and of itself was intended to lead toward the chipping, but certainly if the chipping were to occur, Bitcoin would be part of that process because ID and security is very, very important to that. Right now, the current Bitcoin exchanges, I looked at it briefly, and to me it was just a lot more trouble than it was really worth. And I know there's the so-called Bitcoin mining so that the wealth creation is distributed. But I think the Bitcoin mining may have actually been a crowdsourced key breaking system because everyone knows about public key cryptography. And it's one way. You can get from the private key to the public key, but you can't get from the public key back to the private key. That's not exactly true. With enough computer power, you can, in fact, find the private key from the public key. And I think that was a big part of what the so-called Bitcoin mining system was all about. Okay?
No. That's true, Michael. But, you know, you can put all your Bitcoins on a thumb drive. What's smaller than a thumb drive? Just an implant. That's right up their alley. You know, you go from having your wealth on a thumb drive at Bitcoin to having your wealth on a implant in your skin.
Well, it's possible, and it's one application, but I don't think Bitcoin in and of itself is supposed to be the gateway to the chipping. Again, there are so many other areas of financial endeavor that want to use this. Mo, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I'm taking a peek at Down Detector, and whatever's affecting Spectrum, it seems to be getting worse. There's a lot of red on the map, and the number of complaints is rising. So somebody made a goof somewhere, and it's affecting us here in Hawaii. It's also causing major problems in both Los Angeles and Seattle, Washington, which also happen to be where the cables that carry the internet to Hawaii originate. So that's why we've got such poor performance here, and I'm frankly amazed that our BAM user video can even get out there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, one of the things that I've noticed is when you make a mistake with a word, it's always funny. Like the normal people, it just comes up to be nothing, but I actually wrote them down. So on the lighter side of things, I got a little list of funny Rivero word flubs.
Okay.
So you battleships equals battle shafts. Freedom of speech was freedom of screech, like freedom to screech. Okay. Slam dunk was slam dung. Produce was produce.
I don't recall making those flubs. Are you on Spectrum by any chance? Because you may be getting a poor quality signal.
No, this is an endearing quality of you that, like, you don't make normal word flubs. They're always funny. Okay, this one, medieval-aged warlords equals middle-aged warlords.
All right, well, I'll have to be more careful about that. Okay.
No. It's an endearing quality. It's really.
Well, I don't want to be endearing. I want to be accurate, and I was absolutely unaware of any of these flubs. I'll have to check with our control room technician.
No. They're extremely low. You have a very, very high eloquent command of the English language, which is the sign of your intelligence. Which brings me into one of my points, questioning Trump's intelligence. The fact that the vocabulary and eloquent command of the language is an indication of intelligence, and Trump has such a horrible command of the language, he just brutalizes it. We were always looking past that and making excuses for it, but now I'm starting to think that that's actually just a standard marker. I don't think he's very overall intelligent. What he probably has is like street smart, like someone in jail that's like really good at surviving in jail. He's really good at surviving in this fat cat, little like niche of society that he's in. But outside of that,
we're almost out of time, but let me share a counter argument on that. One of the things that very intelligent people learn early on is that their intelligence can make other people uncomfortable. And so you learn to hide it and tone it down, especially if you're in the world of trying to do a business deal. You want the other people to like you, and the last thing you do is try and make them feel like they're inferior. And so I'm not ready to say that because of the way Donald Trump speaks that he's not an intelligent man. Right now, the problem with Donald Trump is he's being controlled from outside, and he seems to lack a spine. Okay? All right, we're going to let you go, Matthias.
Okay, fair enough. I'll call in another day to finish my list.
Oh,
Thank you, Michael. Have a good day.
Please don't. Please don't. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to take a phone call from Ron in the Bronx. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. Aloha. I had a two-part question about North Korea. First, I just wanted to know the beginnings of the war, because when you look it up online, it says the North invaded the South and the U.S. came and helped them push back. Second, also I've seen there's a video on Facebook explaining the background of the Korean War, and in it they say that napalm was used, and the girl that narrates the video also said napalm, Agent Orange. Now, I'm pretty sure they're two different things. Could you just explain more about that, please?
Well, yeah, napalm is basically jellied gasoline that is dropped in a tank. The tank ruptures open, spreads it all over. There's an igniter. It sets it on fire, and it sticks to everything, and it burns. It was used heavily in Vietnam. Agent Orange is a defoliant chemical, and I don't think it existed during the Korean War, but it was certainly used to devastating effect in Vietnam. It was actually developed and tested right here at the University of Hawaii. They tested it down on the Big Island, and where they did the test, you still cannot go in. It's all fenced off. There's all kinds of warning signs. And apparently there was a mishap where 3 students got killed with this stuff. It's highly toxic. It's based on dioxin, which is this very toxic, nasty molecule that never, ever goes away.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the beginnings of the Korean War, could you just, because I hear people say the U.S. invaded North Korea. I also hear North Korea invaded South and the U.S. helped push back. Explain more about the beginnings?
Well, basically, I'm going to have to defer on that and go back and do a little more research. My memory of this, obviously something that happened when I was very, very young, was that the U.S. actually encouraged the South to try and invade the North to sort of push back against the Soviet Union, which was exerting its influence, its sphere of influence, into Asia. And North Korea was one of the areas where that was happening. So was Vietnam. And that really started it. But I'm going to have to go back and take a look at the actual roots of the Korean War, because very often we find out what we're told in the history books is not always necessarily accurate. Again, we're always told that the Soviet Union put missiles in Cuba for no reason at all. Then you do your homework and you realize that the Soviet Union was responding to U.S. nuclear missiles being placed in Turkey. The same thing with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, that they just rolled on in and took the place for themselves. And then you do your research and realize that what was going on is the U.S. was trying to covertly regime change Afghanistan in their favor, and that was what led to the Soviet response. So I'll have to take a look at that, and I will look at that and have it back here tomorrow.
Right. Thank you, Mike. Keep up the great work. We love you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Here in the Bronx City.
Okay, we're going to let you go here. We're getting an update on this situation at Fox News. Now that Shine has resigned, apparently Sean Hannity may leave Fox News as early as this week. There's a grand purge going on there. Now, getting on back to the world of computers. Every Intel platform from Nehalem to Kaby Lake has a remotely exploitable security hole. And Semi-Accurate has been begging Intel to fix this issue for literally years. And they may be listening. But basically, it allows the remote takeover of the computer over the network. And according to Semi-Accurate, there's literally no Intel box made in the last 9 years that isn't at risk. Now, maybe that remote exploit was put in there at the request of the NSA, and now it's been discovered and made public. The cyber criminals will be looking for it. And by the way, somebody somehow got into my desktop yesterday morning and really messed it up. It took me the whole day to get it ready to do the radio show today, and it's still not running properly here. Meanwhile, while we're being constantly exhorted to buy the latest and greatest Windows, Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 5000, the Pentagon, the people in charge of the war, are still running critical systems on Windows 95, 98, and XP. Now, XP I can understand. Toward the end of its life cycle, it was very stable and reliable. But they're allowed to hang on to their old operating systems and software. They're not being flogged to upgrade and buy new stuff. Maybe that's the reason over the communications confusion that said that Carl Vinson was heading to North Korea when it was actually down in Indonesia. And now Donald Trump is out there saying that, yeah, you know, it might have even been China behind the election hacks. They're just out there guessing. Oh, it could be Russia, could be China. Let's just nuke them all just to make sure we get the malefactors. If we start seeing demonization of China on TV, everybody should get really, really worried. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, we have been talking about all the problems associated with these personal intelligent assistants, like the Amazon Echo. And they have led to some embarrassing mistakes where the devices will hear a word, misinterpret it, and order products that weren't intended. We're now talking about this new one where they have a camera on it. And they're selling the idea that if you allow this device to watch you while you're getting dressed, it will tell you whether or not you are stylish and the clothing looks good on you. Now, the problem with all of these intelligent assistants is the data, whether it is audio of your voice or video of you in states of undress, does not stay inside the assistant. It goes over the internet to large arrays of computers that will very quickly do the voice to text and decide what to do with that and do whatever analysis they are doing that says, yes, your outfit looks really good, and then sends you on to the appropriate merchant for more of the same. The problem is if anybody gets into Amazon, they can access that data. They can access pictures of you and your family in embarrassing conditions that can be used for cyberbullying or even blackmail. And don't tell me that Amazon can't be hacked into, because now we're finding out Google got hacked into and malware was being distributed on its double-click ad platform. All these people are running on computers in which there are intentional vulnerabilities installed at the demand of the United States government. And they have made our entire IT infrastructure very vulnerable. Very vulnerable indeed. Now, apparently somebody leaked some documents out from Facebook where they mounted a research program to have their system identify emotionally vulnerable and insecure youth who were reading or posting to Facebook in order to facilitate predatory advertising practices, where they would find these vulnerable, insecure people, and they would feed them products to give them a confidence boost. You know, you will feel better about yourself if you wear this thing. And apparently the Australian got these internal documents from Facebook saying that Facebook is exploiting the moods and insecurities of teenagers for the benefit of advertisers. And that is another way in which we are all being abused and our privacy being invaded in the name of a fast buck. Now, we have been talking for a long time about the decline in education here in the United States of America. And it very much is. Education today in our public schools is learning to recite certain things, believe in certain things. They don't teach you how to think, how to analyze, how to study, and it's now about to get worse. Over in New York, at Life Sciences Secondary School, they are dumping all their textbooks in favor of modern electronic teaching devices, of which apparently they don't have anywhere near enough. They've got 2 computers per classroom. There, I just did it. Per classroom. And they're basically taking away from the kids the ability to go and actually research what they're being told by the teachers. Instead, they're getting video feeds. And the books that were being thrown out, most of them in good condition, too. A lot of schools could use them. Textbooks on 8th grade math, algebra, geometry, various sciences, and English literature, along with Barron's Regents exam prep and SAT study guides. Copies of Romeo and Juliet and A Streetcar Named Desire were in that pile. So now the classes are basically dealing with carts of laptops and video feeds online, probably from CNN and MSNBC and everything else. Just look at the TV, believe what they tell you, and know you can't go double-check the claims about human-caused global warming. That's a very, very alarming trend. Take the books away from our kids. They haven't burned them, but it's as great a crime. Now, there is a monster storm over on the eastern side of the United States. Maybe that's a big part of what's causing Singular all these problems here. But apparently they had a huge snowfall in West Kansas. It shut down the highway along a 130-mile stretch of Interstate 70. Blizzard conditions. This is the 1st of May. Blizzard conditions. And that was on Sunday, and they got the road reopened early this morning. But it was pretty heavy. And it's not just the United States. Over in India, Himachal Pradesh receives a snowfall. Vehicular movement gets disrupted on the roads of the district. And apparently some of those roads are still blocked from the heavy snowfall. And even Claire and I have been noticing the temperature seems to be going down here in Hawaii, especially at night. It's getting really, really cold. Now, over in Pueblo, they're dealing with power outages. Apparently, heavy snow and wind are bringing debris from trees, tearing down the power lines. Apparently, the trees have not been trimmed back. We need to spend the money on the wars, don't you understand that? Another story, record-breaking winter storm leaves thousands in Texas Panhandle without power. And again, same thing. Heavy, wet snow and high winds knocked down the power lines, made road conditions hazardous. Now, up in Minnesota, which we know does get cold, 1st of May, snow is falling. A winter storm warning is in effect. But none of this is going to discourage the global warming cultists. In fact, they were going to have a march in Denver. We must stop global warming. Unfortunately, they got hit with a foot of snow and they had to cancel the march. I love the irony. I love the irony. We got to protest global warming. We can't. There's a foot of snow out there. We're socked in here. The carbonazis are still at it. Apparently, there was a column written in the New York Times that basically said it is absurd to blindly support the claims of global warming without getting both sides of the argument and getting the facts. And the guy was just torn into, blasted by the left for saying, how dare you question the most holy revealed dogma of St. Al of the Gore, that the world is warming and it's all our fault. Meanwhile, out in Flagstaff, they're now planning a carbon tax, another way to take money from ordinary working people and give it to more rich people. And as you know, a lot of people have been very upset, angry with Bill Nye the Science Guy. And he said some pretty bizarre things recently, which I can't repeat on the radio without risking somebody's FCC license. But it is worth going back and looking at this gentleman's background. And by the way, the other day when I said he was the son of Louis Nye, I misspoke. They're not related. Except that they both love comedy. Now, Bill Nye's total scientific bona fide is an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering from Cornell and a short stint at Bowen. But he left that stint to pursue a career in comedy. And he landed a recurring role on Almost Live, a Seattle area sketch comedy television show. And his character on that sketch comedy show was Bill Nye the Science Guy. That's where it came from. He also got to be a voice on Christopher Lloyd's laboratory sidekick in Back to the Future, the animated series. So Nye then leveraged that success to sell PBS on a show for Bill Nye the Science Guy. And because of this, a career in TV comedy, Bill Nye is now presumed to be the go-to authority on exoplanets and dark matter and whether we're living in a computer simulation and, of course, all environmental policy. He's not a scientist. He's an actor. He's always been an actor. That's what he does. And that's why so many of the things he said on his show are just absolutely bogus. Now, over in Belgium, they are now banning Monsanto's glyphosate for non-professionals. In other words, professional farmers, weed removers can still get it, but ordinary homeowners, gardeners can't. It's that dangerous. And France has already banned glyphosate in public spaces. And they're very concerned about it because it has been declared a probable human carcinogen. Of course, Monsanto says it's perfectly safe, but then that's what Monsanto always says about their products here. Another little story, this is out of Blacklisted News. This is up in San Francisco, where apparently Monsanto has been accused in court of operating an army of online shills to go scream abuse at anybody who criticizes Monsanto or their products. And apparently they're being sued by a plaintiff who claims to have developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as the result of exposure to glyphosate. And as part of the trial, they're saying Monsanto is deliberately trying to remove any negative information about its products from the Internet. Because as long as it makes money, it's good. It's making money, and that's all that really counts in the United States. That's all that really matters. If it hurts you, well, it's an economic opportunity for whoever's going to fix what's wrong with you. By the way, speaking of what's wrong with you, Bumblebee Foods has announced a recall of 3 types of their chunk light tuna due to problems in the commercial sterilization process. Probably most of you don't realize that after the tuna is in the can is then subjected to heat to both cook and sterilize the tuna inside the can. Then they put the labels on and it goes to the store. And apparently the 3 products of the problem are the 5-ounce Bumblebee Chunk Light Tuna in water, the 5-ounce Bumblebee Chunk Light Tuna in oil, and the 4-pack of 5-ounce Bumblebee Chunk Light Tuna in water. And these were all produced in February of last year and distributed nationally. So if you have these products on your shelf at home, you might want to think about taking them back to your grocery store and see if they are, in fact, part of the recall. Because it was 31,500 cases are involved in the recall. That's a lot of tuna. Now then, interesting little story. This is coming out of the BBC. There is a fund in England. It's called the Cancer Drugs Fund. And apparently it is being denounced as a huge waste of money that actually resulted in patients suffering unnecessarily from the side effects of the drugs. We're going to take a break for commercials. More about this when we come back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the Cancer Drugs Fund. And this goes back to an election promise made by the Conservatives in Great Britain to pay for cancer drugs that were not covered under the National Health Service. And so cancer patients could avail themselves of drugs outside those being used by NHS using this fund. And it ran from 2010 to last year, and it cost £1.27 billion. And researchers are looking back at it, and they're saying that only 1 in 5 of the people who were given these drugs got any benefit from them, and patients were suffering the unnecessary the side effects of the drug, causing more harm than good. But it was a giveaway to the cancer pharmaceutical industries. Now here's another article. This is out of Investment Watch blog. How would you feel if your doctor were bribed to give you a drug? It actually does happen. There's all kinds of encouragements and presents and sharing of the revenues. The Gardasil shot, the cost of that shot, and it is expensive, is split 50-50 between the company that makes the vaccine and the practitioner who injects it. They're being financially incentivized to stick those needles into people. So over at Novartis, they have just been fined $50 million by the government of South Korea for bribing doctors to prescribe the company's drugs. Last year, prosecutors in South Korea raided Novartis offices to gather documents and account books. And officials later indicted a half-dozen Novartis executives, as well as more than a dozen doctors and 5 medical journal heads. And they are now on trial. Healthcare is not about your health. In fact, the sicker you are, the more money they can make off of you. And that's what's driving it. Money junkieism masquerading as a doctor. Now another story, this is coming out of BBC. Breast surgeon Ian Patterson needlessly harmed patients. Now this Ian Patterson has been convicted of intentionally wounding his patients in completely unnecessary operations. He was found guilty of 17 counts of wounding with intent relating to 9 women and 1 man. And basically the jurors at the Nottingham Crown Court decided the surgeon carried out extensive life-changing operations for no medically justifiable reason. Remember that doctor here in the United States was sentenced to prison for something like 40 years because during his entire career he'd been telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer in order to sell them chemotherapy and radiation treatments. And here is the really telling aspect of that case. He wasn't imprisoned for the harm he caused to his patients. He was imprisoned for defrauding Medicare. It was the money, the crime against the money was what got him out. Now, as you know, we have the vaccine industry is lobbying heavily for mandatory vaccine laws in every state of the United States. In addition to mandatory vaccines for children in order to go to school, they're now pushing for adult vaccination for people who may have already had the disease being vaccinated against. I've had measles and mumps, and I don't need the vaccines. But apparently now, North Carolina Congresswoman Virginia Foxx is introducing new legislation that would deny you your job if you aren't vaccinated. You are not going to be allowed to have a job in the United States unless you've had all of the however many vaccines are on that list. And once they have a law like this, you can, it's a guarantee. They'll add more to that list. Okay. Just had a very loud noise out the window. I'm a little flinchy if you hadn't noticed. We'll be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about vaccines, the vaccine industry. And again, we're supposed to be having this Vaccine Safety Commission from President Trump. It's being headed up by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's a known vaccine critic for quite a long time. And we're finding out now that the corporate media is just absolutely pretending it does not exist. When Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was interviewed on Tucker Carlson's show, he said, this is only the second time in 10 years I've been allowed to talk about this on a news program. So it basically tells us anytime Robert F. Kennedy is doing an interview, somebody walks up to him and says, you will not talk about vaccines. You absolutely will not do that. Now, story that's coming on out, apparently there's been a new study out of Yale University that ties vaccines to multiple brain disorders, of which we can presume one is autism. And apparently there's been another study done in Japan that links vaccines to autism. But you're not supposed to know about that. You're supposed to just go on trusting the doctor, trusting the pharmaceutical industries, or the pharmaceutical industrial complex, as it were, and go on giving them your money to stick these needles into your children. And if your child suffers a serious adverse reaction, oh, it's not the doctor's fault. You must have abused your child. It was shaken baby syndrome. Or it's genetics. It was going to show up sooner or later anyway. It's got nothing to do with it. Now, one of the problems about having to go to a hospital is it is full of sick people. And a lot of what they have is contagious. And sometimes the hospitals are not as scrupulously sanitizing as they should be. And apparently there is a new superbug fungus that is emerging in U.S. hospitals, mostly in New York and New Jersey. And apparently this fungus, this superbug, was first identified in Japan in 2009, and it spread to more than a dozen countries around the globe. The first case in the United States goes back to 2013, but most of the cases were reported just last year. So that's a big issue. Now, here is an interesting story out of Natural News, where apparently there was a child who was autistic. I'm not even going to say why he became autistic. But apparently the parents decided to treat the kid with cannabis oil. And apparently they got a call from the school where the child was being cared for, who said the child has started talking. And he was able to say the vowels, then he added the consonants, and now he's speaking full words and complete sentences, told his mother that he loves her. So there may be a way back for some of this vaccine-caused damage. But of course we're seeing the alcohol and tobacco industries, they're out there lobbying against cannabis. It's got no medical value. You can't have this thing that you can grow in your backyard to enjoy. You will buy it from your local bottle shop or your local tobacconist here. Another little gift from nature. Apparently there's an extract from maple syrup, real maple syrup. A lot of what is sold in your supermarket as maple syrup does not actually come from a maple tree. You need to keep that in mind. Same thing with honey. A lot of what is sold as honey in your supermarket does not actually come from a bee. but this extract from real maple syrup is being found to boost the effectiveness of antibiotics in lab tests. And apparently this syrup makes disease-causing bacteria more susceptible to the antibiotics. And that is a real issue because we have seen the disease-causing organisms evolving to tolerate the antibiotics. When antibiotics first showed up, oh, it was a cure for everything. We're going to cure this and cure that. And they were just flooding them onto the market. And the disease-causing organisms that were not killed by the antibiotics came back more resistant, generation after generation. And so a lot of medical experts are saying that our modern antibiotics, they're finite in terms of how long they'll be effective, that we will reach a stage where they're no longer effective. And they'll have to look for something else. But this little maple syrup trick apparently helps the antibiotics work a lot better. So that's a good thing. And again, a lot of good stuff coming out of nature. Now, here is a story, again, from Natural News, and it's talking about some alarming statistics that are showing an upsurge in strokes in America among young people between the ages of 35 and 44. You don't think of people in that age bracket as being susceptible to strokes. That's something that happens to old people. And apparently between 2003 and 2012, stroke hospitalizations rose 42% for the men and 30% for women in this young age group. Now, this study was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Neurology, and basically looking at the billing data, admission data, and they calculated the numbers. And they were saying, what's going on here? These are strokes that are leading to blood clots that block the blood from reaching the brain. That's what a stroke is. In total, there were at least 30,000 more stroke hospitalizations in 2012 than there were in 2003. And every age group studied is showing an increase. Now, one of the causes, of course, is the obesity epidemic. And we know the obesity epidemic is not because of our lifestyle choices. It's because they're actually putting chemicals in the food that make you want to eat more, so that you will buy more and they will make more money. Monosodium glutamate. It's sold as a flavor enhancer. It's also a migraine trigger, which is why I have to avoid it. But what it actually does is it scrambles the signal to the brain that says, I have eaten enough. So people will go on eating and eating even though they're actually full. Then you have aspartame, which used to be a biological weapon and is now an artificial sweetener. And it's marketed as a diet aid. It doesn't actually work because the consumption of aspartame makes your body crave real carbohydrates. And this is one of the reasons why supermarkets will often have these little bundling deals where there's a liter of diet soda full of aspartame and it's bundled with big bags of corn chips or potato chips because they know you're going to drink the soda and your body's going to say, I need a carbohydrate, and you're going to eat those chips. And the net result is you gain weight. America's obesity epidemic is an artifact of the way food is processed, manufactured, and sold in this country. And that's why we have these issues. And there are other chemicals as well. The growth hormones that are pumped into poultry and cattle, and any of these hormones that are not fully metabolized at the time the animal is being harvested will be ingested by the customer. And your body will respond to the growth hormone the same way the cattle and the chickens did. You will grow. And it really is very tragic to realize that you're living under a government and a corporate culture that is all about getting more money out of you. And they don't care if what they're selling you is actually good for you or not. We're seeing lobbying efforts now where they want to cut back on what ingredients they're required to put on the labels. Right now, ingredients below a certain percentage of the total volume of the food product do not have to be listed. We don't know what's lurking in there. Food manufacturers know that people are trying to avoid monosodium glutamate, and so they use euphemisms for it. There's some 30 or 40 different euphemisms, like hydrolyzed yeast protein or yeast extract. And it all means additional added synthetic monosodium glutamate. Because they still want you to eat it and then eat more and buy more, and they don't want you to be able to say, oh, I can't eat, I shouldn't eat this, it's got MSG in it. Same thing with the fight against GMO labeling. They want to sell you what they want to sell you, and they don't think you should have the right to know what it is you're being fed and to have a choice to say, no, I do not choose to eat that. In a way, you're being treated like just more livestock, where the government will decide what you're going to eat or not eat, what medicines you must take, what medicines you're not allowed to take. Look at Michelle Obama's school lunches. They were absolutely appalling. Now, Trump says he's going to shut that down, and a lot of schools have already kicked the program out and said it's not working, because the kids were just throwing that stuff in the trash. And then they were spending the rest of the day hungry. We have lost so many freedoms, and right now I envy people who are still able to live on a farm, a family farm, because they're the only ones who are absolutely certain of what they're eating for dinner, where it came from out back. That was the way I lived when I was a kid, living in New Hampshire. Going to have dinner, we'd walk out back, get all the veggies that we wanted, go out to the chicken coop, grab the eggs. The meat that we were eating came from cattle that we had raised ourselves. That's how it all worked. And it was healthy food. It was good, safe, natural, organic, healthy food. And we're seeing this attempt to end that self-sufficiency for food, to once again force you to be dependent on some corporate supply chain. And the danger with that is, in addition to the threats to your health, is that if we are all forced to be dependent on various corporate supply chains for our food, for our water, for our electricity, for whatever, and there is an actual war that breaks on out, or the economy implodes and that supply chain breaks down, there are going to be a lot of very hungry, desperate people in the streets of America who don't have that option of just going on out to the backyard and grabbing some food. And by the way, if you have a house that has a sizable backyard, you should be getting into growing your own food back there. And I know a lot of towns are actually passing zoning laws saying that you are not allowed to grow food on your own property in your backyard. A lot of places are saying you can't grow food in your front yard. It's unsightly. There's nothing unsightly about an ear of corn. There's nothing unsightly about summer squash. It's just a way of keeping you imprisoned by the corporatocracy. Now, earlier we were talking about Planned Parenthood, and apparently this top executive at Planned Parenthood drives a Lamborghini, according to this article out of Investment Watch blog. And once again, he's been caught on videotape talking about baby parts prices. And if this practice is not going to stop, then I'm in agreement with those who say that our already currently overstressed budget shouldn't be sending any money to Planned Parenthood. They're making a fortune selling baby parts. If this guy's driving a Lamborghini, then they're not hurting for money, are they? Okay. Let's see. A lot of people still talk. Apparently, Bernie Sanders' wife could face jail time. The FBI is investigating her over a college scam. Oh, here's a breaking story. Apparently, there's been some kind of an event in the heart of Toronto's business district at the Scotia Plaza. There's been several loud bangs and black smoke is pouring out from beneath the plaza, and they're not sure exactly what happened, whether it was an attempt at terror or just infrastructure failed and the thing blew. We will take a look at that on this last commercial break and see if we can get some additional information about that. Okay, apparently there's an article over here where there's a possibility Social Security could actually default. And the Democrats are going to try and blame Donald Trump for it, but Donald Trump didn't create this mess. It was created for him by President Bill Clinton. Remember Bill Clinton's magic federal government budget surplus? He created that by looting Social Security of the cash buildup for the baby boomer retirements, which are happening now, and spending it as general revenue. And yes, the Social Security Trust Fund got a bunch of special Treasury bonds to replace the money, but the government can't redeem those. And that's why we're hearing all this talk about raising the retirement age or having to cut back benefits to people who have already spent their lives paying into the system. But that's what caused this problem. And I didn't think it was going to happen this soon, but apparently the Social Security Trust Fund is looking at a default. And what a mess they have made of this country. This was once the greatest nation on earth. It isn't anymore. It's clearly a failing empire. And we have a government that is cheating its own people, lying to them to rob them, embezzling their retirement money. And they think they can get out of this mess if they start a global war. Except that we're not going to win this war. We don't have the manpower, the money, the manufacturing, or the moral authority. Claire and I have tried very, very hard to derail this rush to war. It is a bad idea. War in general is a bad idea. Getting us into a war that we are likely to use is a terrible idea. I'd like to find a way to stop it. All right, we're going to take a commercial break here. We'll be back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our program on this Monday. And we're getting an update here from the Scotia Plaza up in Toronto's business district. It's obviously the home of Scotiabank. And they've identified the cause of the blast. Apparently there was a room called the Hydro Vault, which contains high voltage transformers, oil cooled, and apparently one of them blew up. And maybe more than one. And that is spectacular. I remember many years ago in Southern California, I was driving along the freeway, and all of a sudden, in the field next to me, there was this incredible eruption of fire and smoke. And it turned out it had been an underground power distribution station, and the transformer blew on that. They can be spectacular when they happen. I remember one time when I was working at JPL, and the entire lab got blacked out, except for spaceflight operations, which has its own generators. And it turned out some little tiny animal that they were never able to identify got into the main distribution transformer for the lab, reached across to the wrong wire, and just arced and vaporized here. So, yeah, they can be spectacular. Now, there's an article here called Tech Wreck Coming, and it's sort of a follow-on to a story we did last week about this Silicon Valley startup that was creating an app that would allow you to manage all payments from that one single app. And apparently they raised something like $25 million. They've blown through it all. They never created the app. Now they're going to go out of business, but I assume that the insiders involved stashed some money away for themselves. And so it's leading to this article called Tech Wreck Coming, where Wall Street does seem to be repeating the dot-com boom of the 1990s. Anything that looks to be high-tech, they're ready to invest in it without really looking forward and seeing. Is it something that people are going to want? Is it really going to be useful? And there was a lot of really nutty stuff that was put forward in the 1990s. Then in 2000, the dot-com bubble burst, and this article is saying it looks like there's going to be another one. Everybody is out there, and maybe it's because the investor class doesn't really understand tech. And so they're listening to the sales pitch of this amazing little app that will create gold out of lead in your very pocket, and they don't have the knowledge to be able to say this can't possibly work. And they should get some better in advisors on it. The problem is, in the Wall Street mentality, nobody's interested in gradual, long-term profits. They want a big score right then and there. Real Wolf of Wall Street thinking. And it is in sharp contrast to the way Japan manages its economy, where those investors who invest in a company don't expect to even see any returns for years while the product is being developed and tested and made into something with quality. But in the American system, they'll throw lots of money at anything they think could make them rich enough to retire overnight. And as a result, we get bad investments and bad products. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and talk to Jim Goddard up there in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please share everything you learn here with everyone that you know. We are still hopeful we can find a way to derail this path toward World War III. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.